Hello and welcome back to Full Wet Formula One with your host that's as useful as a full wet tire. Today it is race week. We're going to go into our 2026 Australian Grand Prix predictions. I'm going to go ahead and do a little preface here. I have not watched the entirety of preseason testing. I watched some of it. I was working through some of it. And we're just kind of going a little bit off of vibes, a little bit off of testing. As we all know, testing is not representative at all. We don't know what fuel loads they're running. We don't know what spec of car they're running. We don't know if they're on long run plans. I mean, we can get a little bit of data from that. But overall, we're going off of vibes today. In P22, as we now have 22 grid slots with the addition of Cadillac, in P22, we have Lance Stroll. Now, I'm not here to hate on Lance. There's a lot of people already doing that. I think Lance actually kind of sometimes cooks. He really comes alive in the wet. If we get some rain in Australia, this actually maybe could change because it's a great equalizer. But I just think that Aston Martin car is a complete dog. We haven't seen anything good yet so far from Aston Martin. Testing was terrible. That Honda power unit seems abysmal. It sounds like recently they found maybe some of the cause of the Aston Martin issues with some vibrations going on in the car that are causing issues with the battery. But until that gets sorted out, I'm going to just go ahead and be kind of putting Aston Martin at the back of the grid here. And so that completes P22. And to no surprise, P21, I hate to say it, I love Fernando Alonso, but that's our guy. Fernando, I think, is still one of the best drivers on the grid. I kind of rank him maybe top 6 or so. I think if you gave him the car, he could still compete for a championship. He's wicked fast over a lap. He has masterful racecraft. He's masterful in the race in general. He has good pace. It's shocking to see somebody at his age still performing like he is, but unfortunately, he's going to have to relive the McLaren Honda nightmares with Aston Martin. In P20, I'm going for Valtteri Bottas. I think, that last season at Sauber wasn't super impressive. I used to rate Valtteri pretty high, but he's kind of shown a little bit of drop off in his career, and he's driving for Cadillac this year. I think Cadillac has done a phenomenal job in getting to the grid early with a car that works. They showed up well in testing. They did a decent number of laps. They had some problems, but for a new team, I think they've done exceptionally well. The Ferrari power unit is kind of going to be what sets them apart from Aston Martin. But overall, I've got to go Valtteri here. I think Checo probably has his number this season. That's my kind of season prediction for that. But I don't see him doing much better. And I don't see either one of them doing much better than kind of languishing at the back of the grid here for a while. I hope that in the next seasons upcoming, Cadillac can get some more people on board and start to do well. But for now, that's kind of where they sit. For P19, I have Arvid Lindblad. Now, I don't think the Racing Bulls is going to be a terrible car. I think that Red Bull has kind of cooked with their engine. I think they've done fairly well, way better than I think most of us expected them to. But we have Arvid coming to Formula One. It's going to be his first season. I don't really expect a whole lot out of him. I think that this is a perfectly fine place for him to start. I think if he just hops in the car and finishes a race, then he's doing pretty good. A lot better than the rookies last year seemed to do. I think Kimi was the only one that made it through Australia. And that was a factor of the rain being in the race. But overall, I think this is kind of where I expect him to sit in this first race. I think it's going to take him a little while to get his head around the battery management that's going on. I think just that jump to Formula One is a big leap from where he's been. And yeah, that's just kind of where I expect this to pan out for him. In P18, I have Checo Perez. So like I said before, I kind of rate Checo a little bit over Valtteri here. I think that last season at Red Bull isn't really something to judge him completely on. I think we've seen everyone in that second seat do pretty poorly. I think his stints that we've seen him do in the midfield have been phenomenal, and I think he's going to be limited here by the car. I think if Cadillac are able to provide him with something more later on throughout the season, they are a little bit bigger team than Haas is currently. If they have the right people in the right places, maybe we'll see Valtteri and Checo climb up the grid a little bit more. But for right now, it's a brand new team. Kind of just rating them here because that Ferrari power unit actually seems to be pretty good. It seems to be good on a race start. And I think that the Minister of Defense is probably going to do what he does best and get ahead early here with that Ferrari power unit and then keep those behind him there the entire race. Kind of similar to what we saw Alonso do last year, where he was just kind of the very front of the DRS train and nobody could get past him. I think we're going to kind of see that same action from Checo Perez this year. And that concludes P18. We're going to jump to P17, where I have Carlos Sainz. Now, this kind of pains me to say this, and I'm going to show my color here a little early. I don't really have a favorite team, but I want Williams to do well so badly. Not just this year, every year I want Williams to do well. I've really had high hopes for this year with, James and Carlos and Alex all talking about 2026 being their year. I was super shocked at the 2 Carlos Sainz podiums last year. And I just think that maybe Alex is going to get a little bit better handle on the regs early days. And then we're going to see Carlos pull ahead of him later in the season. I think Carlos has some great potential. I think he's one of the more cerebral drivers on the grid. I think he's going to be playing 3D chess later on in the season. And I think they're going to bring the weight down on that Williams car. And we'll see Carlos Sainz do a lot better. But for the first race, I think this is pretty fair for where we've seen that Williams car at. And with the rumors that it's pretty overweight and they've had some problems with development. So I think that's where we're going to see Carlos Sainz. And I think in P16, we're going to have Alex Albon. Like I just said, I think he's going to adapt just a little bit quicker to the fundamentals of this race season. But I think overall, Carlos will probably have his number. I don't really have much more to say here. I think, like I said, Williams is kind of underdeveloped and a little bit heavy. And I think throughout the season, we'll see that development come along. And with that Mercedes power unit, I think they're going to do fine. I just think starting out overweight and with the problems they had in the early development of that car, they'll probably struggle a little bit in this early season, and we'll see them come alive hopefully around Miami, if not by the summer break. If they're improving their processes in-house, they may be able to get that development out early. But yeah, if not, I think maybe by the summer break, they'll start to kind of come online. P15, I'm going Nico Hülkenberg. Nico's another one. I rate him highly as a driver. I think he's one of the best midfield drivers we've ever seen in the sport. I think he probably should have had opportunities at the front of the field, and he kind of just barely missed out on several occasions. I mean, there was a time where he was almost into a Red Bull seat, but I think the car is going to hold him back. I think this year Audi has done a pretty phenomenal job for a first-time power unit supplier, but I think that they're just going to have to get their head around the sport, get their head into F1 and continue development. And I think we'll see some great things from Audi in the long term. I have no reservations about their capability in motorsport, as they have such a storied history of entering into motorsport and then within a few years becoming a top team. I think that is definitely in the cards for Audi. And I think with Nico and with Gabriel, we have a good chance of seeing that happen. I think they're both going to help develop this team. And I just think that from the start of the season, this is kind of where they sit with their power unit. And I hope that they'll improve throughout the season. I hope they'll improve throughout the next upcoming seasons. And P14, I have Esteban Ocon. So I think the midfield is fairly tight this year. I think the top of the grid is fairly tight also. But I think Haas has done a really good job. They have some of the highest number of laps in preseason testing. But Esteban has kind of not done so well compared to his rookie teammate last year. And I think he's kind of going to follow the same trend this year. I think Ollie is just another caliber driver. I actually rate Esteban pretty highly, but I think with the car, this is a pretty fair spot for him. I think Haas has done pretty well, and I think they've proven that they can develop a car throughout the season like they did last year, and I would like to see Haas do well. That's the smallest team on the grid, so who doesn't like to root for an underdog? But I think that's where Esteban's going to sit for the first race. In P13, I have Gabriel Bortoleto. So Gabriel, I think he did a fantastic job last year. He had Hülkenberg's number in qualifying, and then throughout the race stint, it was kind of a mixed bag. He was a little bit crash happy. I think that that's something he needs to get under control. But we've seen some great drives from him, and I think P13 is a solid place for Audi in their first outing. I mean, I think they would be a little disappointed they're not in the points, but I think you'd have to be stoked finishing that highly. Brand new power unit, brand new team. They did incorporate Sauber, but Sauber was not producing their own power unit, so I think this would be a great result for the team. In P12, I've got Franco Colapinto. Franco had some good outings with Williams. He had Albon's number in some occasions. He has tended to be a little bit crash happy, but I think with the whole winter testing he's got under his belt, I think being fully integrated into that Alpine team at this point. I think he has a good chance of doing some good point scoring this year. I don't think it's going to happen in his first race, but I think this would be a good result for Franco. I think Alpine has cooked. I think Alpine was cooking last year. I've been saying this. I didn't have this channel last year, but if you guys really want, I could pull up some comments that I made on TikTok, YouTube, Instagram, all over last year that Alpine was absolutely cooking with their aerodynamics last year for Pierre to have some of the performance that he had, but they had a terrible engine in that Renault. So thank God they dropped that Renault engine. They're going to be running with Mercedes this year. I think they have a great chance of being maybe top of the midfield this year. But I think for his first outing, Franco Colapinto, P12, I think that'd be a solid finish for him. I think he will see the points many times this year. I just don't think it's going to happen in this first race. I think he's going to be getting that Mercedes power unit under his belt, and we'll see him do a lot better as the season goes on. In P11, I've got Liam Lawson. So I've ranked him quite a bit higher than Arvid Lindblad here. I think Liam has the potential to run a good race. I think he struggled a bit last year coming out of a mental funk, 2 races with Red Bull, kicked back to Racing Bulls. I think that was pretty unfair at the time. He had a big shoes to fill there at Red Bull. It's terrible to be compared to Max Verstappen. I wouldn't want to be compared to Max Verstappen. I don't think very many people on the grid would want to be compared to Max Verstappen. And then kicked right back down to Racing Bulls. He had a lot to overcome mentally. He did. And by the end of the season, I think we saw Lawson being fairly competitive with Isaac Hadjar. Hadjar still won out over the season, of course, but I think we saw Liam Lawson put in some solid performances. I think if he can stop ripping front wings off of his car and knocking into other cars as frequently as he has, we could see him have a pretty good season here. For P10, I have Ollie Behrman. So I've ranked him quite a bit higher than his teammate as well. I think he has Esteban Ocon's number. I think overall, Ollie Behrman is a better driver. I think he's going to have a much higher peak in his career. I would not be at all surprised to see him moved up to Ferrari either next season or the season after. It really just kind of depends on what Lewis does. But Ollie Behrman, P10, I think that Ferrari power unit is pretty good. I think Haas has done a pretty good job this year. They have been super reliable in testing. They've done a ton of laps, and I think they're going to be prepared to score some points in this first race. In P9, we have Pierre Gasly. I think Alpine has done a phenomenal job so far. I think that they've done quite well in testing. I think the car is decent. I think that power unit that they have this year is going to be far better than the one they had last year. And I think we're going to see Pierre on the points pretty frequently this season. In P8, I have Oscar Piastri. This might come as a little bit of a surprise, but I think McLaren is going to fall prey to not being a power unit supplier, not being a full works team. And we saw last year that Oscar struggled quite a bit in those low grip circuits. And it's not that this is a low grip circuit, but more so that these regulations, the cars are going to have far less grip than last year. So I think he might take a little bit of time to get comfortable with that. So I've ranked him a little bit lower. I rate Oscar pretty highly. I like Oscar a lot. I just think that this year he's going to take a little bit of time maybe to get this lower grip formula under his belt, and he's going to have just a lot less downforce than he's used to. And I think he'll just be a little bit slower to get going. Kind of maybe similar boat to Sainz, where I think he'll have a much better progression through the season than where he starts. But I think this is kind of his starting point for the season with this low grip formula we have compared to the ground effect era. In P7, I've got Isaac Hadjar. Now, this can kind of go one of two ways. I think it depends on how this car has been developed, but it's early in the regulation cycle, which is where Max Verstappen's teammates tend to do a little bit better. The car hasn't been super developed to Max's style yet. So I think Isaac Hadjar has a chance here to come out, score some good points. I don't think that this power unit is quite as good maybe as the Mercedes and the Ferrari power unit, but I think Isaac will do fine in this race. I think he'll score some good points for the team. I don't expect him to be super close to Max though. I mean, there's on average 3/10 between the front runner driver in Formula One and the back of the field in terms of driving capability. I think with Max, we see maybe a couple extra tenths on top of that. So I just think it's hard to be compared to Max, but I think P7 is a solid place for Isaac Hadjar in his first race with Red Bull. And honestly, way better than what we've seen basically all last year. So I think this will be a solid points for Isaac. In P6, I'm going Lando Norris. I think it's the exact same kind of Oscar Piastri vibe here, is that they're not a works team yet, and so they're going to be a little bit behind on that car development than the works teams. But I think P6 is a solid place for Lando to start at the very beginning of a regulation cycle. I think his outright pace and his ability to drive in those conditions where you've got a little bit less downforce are already proven. So I think this is a solid starting place for the team, and McLaren will definitely develop. I think their development is actually better than most of the works teams in terms of how quickly they can get upgrades to the car. Last year and the year before, actually, we saw them bring upgrades a whole race ahead of all of the other top teams. And I think that that's where we're seeing a lot of this gain from McLaren, is that their development time is so much shorter than everybody. Well, I can't say so much shorter, but their development time is shorter than everybody else's. So I think over the course of the season, we'll see McLaren develop quite well. In P5, this one was hard for me, but I've got to go Lewis Hamilton. I think Hamilton is going to have a great season compared to last year. Looking at the car, I think the car suits him much better than it did last year. I think the power unit that Ferrari have created seems to be quite good, especially in the race starts. I think we will see Lewis smiling again. I think P5 is a solid place for him to start. And I think we will see him back on the podium this year for sure. I don't think it will be in Australia, but I think we'll see him back on the podium. In P4, I have Kimi Antonelli. Yeah, I think Mercedes has cooked this year. I think their power unit is fantastic. I think aero-wise, the car is pretty good. They did have some reliability issues in testing that they had to sort out. It was apparently not the power unit, though. They've kind of been slated as the best power unit in the game right now. It wouldn't surprise me. And Kimi's great. I think he has a bright future ahead of him. He overcame that slump last year and had some phenomenal drives. Yeah, I think if he can keep the racing clean, we'll see Kimi have a bright future, and I think we'll see him hopefully with his first race win this year. MP3, I have, this was hard. This was very hard. Actually, the top three, I almost could kind of slot them in interchangeably. I struggled a bit to decide what I wanted to do here, but I think P3, we have Charles Leclerc. I think, again, this year is going to be a much better year for Ferrari overall. I think that they've really shown that they could innovate, doing things no other teams are doing. They innovated with the race starts, having that little bit smaller turbo. Maybe hampers them a little bit on the straights, but I think those race starts are going to be really important anyway. As we've kind of seen, qualifying is hugely important in Formula One, especially with how big these cars are. It's hard to pass. Charles has some fantastic racecraft. I think this is going to be a good start for the year for him. He's going to start on the podium, but I just don't think I can put them any higher than this, just with what we've seen from Mercedes. I think Ferrari tends to showboat a little bit in testing. I think that's why we've seen Charles top the timing. I would love to see Charles win. I would love to see Charles end his sadness at Ferrari and win a World Drivers' Championship. I think my kind of wet dream scenario for the season is we have Charles, George, and Max competing for a World Drivers' Championship. I think that would just blow the pants off anything we've seen for the past few years in terms of a driver's title fight. So if we can make that happen, Charles, let's make it happen. MP2, this is going to be probably controversial, but I've gone George Russell. I think Mercedes probably has the best car this year, but I do think that there's going to be an adjustment period to this regulation cycle. So that's why I've gone George Russell P2 here. I think George is a fantastic driver. I think he could definitely fight for a championship if Mercedes gives him the car. And I think he probably will fight for a championship this year. But I think it's going to be a fight. I don't think Mercedes is so far clearly ahead of Ferrari and Red Bull that we can just call this for George yet. There's a lot of people calling it for George right off the bat, but I just don't think we can call it yet. We've seen that there's something in that car for Max. We've seen that there's something in the car for Charles. I think that both Ferrari and Red Bull are going to be competitive this year. I think we may have a three-way title fight on our hands. And at the very least, there's going to be a two-team title fight. I just don't think you can count both Charles and Max out, especially this early. I mean, we have no idea how these cars are going to run. But from what we've seen in testing, I think that they both have an opportunity to be in this fight. And for P1, Max Verstappen. Maybe it's some recency bias. I don't know. Max had a phenomenal end to the last season. I think we saw something in that Red Bull car during testing. And the real reason Max is here is I think he's the most adaptable driver on the grid. And I think he puts in the most work on the grid. I think this has less to do with what Red Bull's done as a team and more about what Max will do as a driver. I think it will be hard to adapt to this regulation cycle faster than Max. And I think he's going to find lap time in places that nobody else is finding lap time in the very beginning of the season. I would expect him to adapt really well. I think he has the biggest capacity of any of the drivers on the grid in terms of his mental capacity behind the wheel. And that's going to allow him to play that 3D chess a little bit earlier in the season than anybody else. And I think it's going to buy him some lap time. I think he will find something in the battery management side. I think he will be fast over one lap. I think he will be fast in the race. And I think he's just a hard driver to beat. When there's chaos, when the decision's up in the air, I think you have to go Max. His ability to get in a car, put in the work, get in the simulator, put in the work, it's second to none. So I have to go Max for this. And like I said, I think, over the course of the season, Max, Charles, George Russell, Kimi Antonelli too, I think we're all going to see them competing at the front. But I just think that early adaptability, the work that he puts in is going to pay off for Max in the early part of the season here. And hopefully we can see a pretty exciting fight throughout the season. And now for the first time ever, we're going to have a guest on Full Wet Formula One. I'd like to introduce my wife. She's going to do a quick little top 5 based purely on vibes. She has not been following preseason testing. She likes to watch the races with me, but it's going to be kind of entirely on vibes for her. So let's see what her top 5 is. Starting in P5. What do you have, Layla?
Charles Leclerc.
Interesting. Charles Leclerc, P5. Fastest in testing. The Ferrari's looking pretty good, but we're going Charles Leclerc, P5. What's your P4?
Lewis Hamilton.
Lewis Hamilton. After last season, she thinks we're ready for a comeback for Lewis Hamilton. All right, P3.
Oscar Piastri.
Oscar Piastri, P3. Okay, and for P2, what do we have?
Mr. George Russell.
George Russell in the Mercedes in P2. And who is your P1?
The one and only Max Verstappen.
Max Verstappen. Okay, her GOAT, Max Verstappen. So we'll see how we stack up throughout the season. Honestly, she stands a pretty good chance of kicking my butt. So we'll see how that stacks up. We'll keep a running total going throughout the season predictions. I kind of plan on doing probably one video a week during the season. We'll take a look at what happened in the last race, and in the same video, we'll do some predictions. We may do some videos in between if there's some breaking news, especially as we get like around silly season, summer break time, and we may do some extra episodes depending on what I have time for. Summer's pretty busy for me as well. Yeah, we'll see what happens. As always, thank you for watching. If you've made it this far, don't forget to like and subscribe. If you've enjoyed your time, it really helps the channel. And stay wet.